I'll tell you what, change can be a bitch. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's movie review of Spider-Man Brand New Day, the latest film in the MCU franchise that is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will be as spoiler-free as possible, I promise. I do have to talk about some of the synopsis, but I will go into not as much detail as I usually would. So, Spider-Man Brand New Day is, of course, Tom Holland's fourth solo film as Spider-Man. We know what happened at the end of No Way Home. He lost everyone because of the mind wipe that they had to do, because of the things he chose to basically have happen to him. And so this movie, which takes place 4 years later, sees Spider-Man as the symbol of New York City. He is, of course, working with the police department, stopping the bad guys that you've seen in the trailer. And in the process, a mysterious new force is threatening Spider-Man as an individual because of certain ways that this mysterious force works, controls people, and so on and so forth. And so this movie, because he has no friends, no people to work with, he has, of course, the Punisher. John Bernthal's the Punisher, of course, is in this movie as like a main character, and some other stories. He has to find not only a way to adapt to a world that is changing around him, but he has to adapt to the fact that, MJ and Ned are no longer like his friends. They know nothing about him. And what does a man, or what does an individual do when change starts to occur? And how do you affect yourself with that change? And how do you move on to things that you were so used to? So it's basically an individual trying to deal with the past and trying to move past the past. And what does that work? And of course, the mysterious new force comes into the mix. And as we know, it causes a lot of chaos in a Spider-Man movie, as they usually do. So, but that's what Spider-Man Brand New Day is. It's basically a continuation of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, but also a way for Spider-Man to kind of adapt and change to his environment, as well as who he is and what he is, and so on and so forth. So that's the story of Spider-Man Brand New Day, as spoiler-free as I can say. So I have to admit, I'm extremely lucky that I got to see this movie early. I will never not be, appreciative of these types of things, because this is a highly anticipated movie. It's going to make billions of dollars. It's one of the most lucrative properties in the world when it comes to the character it's portraying. And so going into that, I understand I'm not trying to spoil anything for anyone in the sense of what the character's motivations are. We, of course, have, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Jacob Batalon, so on and so forth appearing in this movie as their normal characters. But then you have Sadie Sink pops up in this movie. John Bernthal comes back as the Punisher. Tramell, Tillman, Mando, Mark Ruffalo, and some other characters I won't spoil. But I just want to go into saying that my thoughts on this movie are going to be as non-spoiler specifically as possible, but just know that I was really excited to see this movie. I think the trailers are pretty great. I like Destin Daniel Cretton. I think Shang-Chi was actually a really good movie. I think Just Mercy is also an interesting movie. So the question honestly remains, and the one that you have to ask yourself is, can this movie really go past and deal with the after effects of what Spider-Man Peter Parker had to deal with after No Way Home? He's kind of left his girlfriend behind, his best friend. So is this movie capable of continuing that story, to be fairly honest? I personally think this is probably the best Spider-Man movie, live action, not animated, but live action, since Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2. And the reason I say that is because I think this movie accomplishes something that I was not expecting, is take characters who we've come to know and kind of love in the MCU franchise, attempt to, and successfully attempt to, give an emotional depth to the situation. We have a character like Spider-Man Peter Parker who's lost pretty much everything, and here he has to deal with the ramifications of what he did in No Way Home. And he also has to look as the savior of a city that is in turmoil, whether it be, Scorpion or, other characters that are causing chaos and so on and so forth. And I think this movie's emotional core and how Tom Holland has to navigate the trials and tribulations of just change in what's going on with him as like a human being and what's going on with the world around him is a fascinating thing that this movie accomplishes with like full greatness, I guess you could say. You know, the one thing that I always thought the original trilogy of the Tom Holland franchise missed is that emotional depth that it kind of leaned into with No Way Home when it came to the death of May Parker and stuff like that. But this movie just, it takes the emotional, and this is Tom Holland, I think, his best performance, to be fairly honest, which is kind of crazy. But I think it takes that emotional depth and the emotionality of, you know, feeling alone and having nothing but your work and the Spider-Man costume. And how does that work? You know, if you think about yourself, or if you ever felt alone yourself, this movie has a great justification for dealing with that kind of thing. And on top of that, you know, you're dealing with the fact that you have no friends. You know, once again, his two best friends are kind of, they don't remember him, and then you're having to deal with all these other scenarios like taking care of the city. You have the police force basically on your side. Then you're dealing with like damage control. You're dealing with this new mysterious entity. You're just dealing with all these things, and it perfectly balances, which was fantastic, the whole entire situation. You know, watching Tom Holland just have to deal with everything must have been a difficult task, and I think he does wonders in this movie. And playing off, you know, people like Sadie Sink and especially John Bernthal, who I think he and John Bernthal have a great chemistry. Tramell Tillman, who I really like from Severance. I just think this movie just works on all levels. It's actually surprisingly potent with like, especially today's society and dealing with, you know, what does it mean to be a hero, which I know a lot of the Marvel movies have done. But I don't think a Spider-Man movie has done that since Spider-Man 2, to be fairly honest. And it's pretty crazy to think about. But this movie is just, it goes emotional. It's not perfect because the ending is, you know, it gets a little long in the tooth because it's 2 hours and 25 minutes. But I think it works, and I think it makes you feel, and I think it really justifies the fact that it's about alone, about having nothing, and what does that affect you, and how does that affect you. And you see things that happen to Tom Holland in this movie that really make you realize that not everything is about, you have to be about yourself instead of the whole, I guess you could say. And that's what this movie kind of juggles with, and I think Destin Daniel Cretton does a really nice job of balancing that. But the movie probably has some of the best action sequences of a Spider-Man movie. The shots you see in the trailer of like what look like comic book shots are some of the most fascinating. There's some really cool POV shots of course, Spider-Man swinging around the city. I think the visual effects are some of the best that Spider-Man's ever had. And I think it's a movie that, as it moves along, as it makes its revelations, as it does what it does, it makes you really feel, and it makes you have a great time with, like I said, the visual flair to the movie and what is happening, and the music from Michael Giacchino and stuff like that. It's a really well shot, really well put together film. And as you can tell, I'm trying not to spoil anything, but it's a really potent Marvel movie, which is pretty crazy. But like I said, you know, between the set pieces, which are fantastic, you know, there's some really cool shots in this movie, to the supporting cast like Tramell Tillman and, you know, Michael Mando and stuff like that. I think in the end, I think this movie really is fantastic. It really is amazing, you know, pun intended. It's an amazing movie, one of the best in the MCU, and yeah, I can't wait to see it again, to be fairly honest. It's pretty nice to see 4 films into a franchise that really kind of hits emotional growth and actually attempts to take on things that the series never really does, especially when it comes to Spider-Man. But when you moved into like from Spider-Man, the original Sam Raimi film, into Spider-Man 2, there was like a level of depthness and a level of like sincerity that the movie plays into, and it also had great villains. And then you have this franchise with Tom Holland, and you have like, you know, Michael Keaton and Jake Gyllenhaal, and then the cast from No Way Home, and then you get this movie which is much smaller and much more contained. That's what's nice about it, is it feels like an early Marvel movie. It allows the movie to have its own kind of creative force and allow it to be its own thing and not really rely too heavily. I mean, it does, like I said, it has some more MCU things, but it relied too heavily on that. But once again, it's a little too long. There's some plot points that could be reworked, but I mean, it's a really good Marvel movie. That's all I can say. So that's my take on Spider-Man Brand New Day, the spoiler-free version. Tried to not give you as much detail as I could possibly do, but highly recommended. Make $1 billion the first weekend or some nonsense like that. But that's my take on Spider-Man Brand New Day. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. You're going to see this movie, so in comments below, what are you expecting out of this movie? People are going to spoil it, so be aware in the comments that there will be spoilers, I'm sure. But let me know what you think of the Tom Holland Spider-Man franchise. But otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. As always, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, guys.